Did you know there's a war going on at WordPress? We're going to discuss that and don't mess with Texas, all on Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. It's Alan Schimmel from Techstrong Group, and you're watching another episode of Techstrong Gang. As I mentioned in the morning, we've got a lot to cover, including the literally wars going on over WordPress, as well as some don't mess with Texas warnings to our favorite good hands people. And has cybersecurity have an apathy problem? Do people care about an apathy problem? We're going to discuss that and more. We've got a great gang to discuss it with. Let me introduce you to them. First of all, he's only going to join us for our A block today because he's off doing important things. What could be more important than being on the gang? But he's our future VP, DevOps, cloud native expert, as well as cyber, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, how are you?
Good to be here. I loved your opening. It's our opening for the podcast. And you're listening to another episode of.
That's right. We've been doing that podcast for about 20 years.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining us today, Mitch, if even for a short time. Then we're going to go down. We have a whole Texas contingent in here today. When they heard it was Don't Mess with Texas Day, we had everyone in Texas lined up. First of all, joining us from snowy Austin, where he's working from home, so as not to contribute to the on-road hazardous conditions, another future analyst, as well as CTO and co-founder for Visible Impact, our friend Guy Currier. Hey, Guy, how are you?
Good to be back. So funny how yesterday, right after the snow fell, I was able to make it into the office. Today, after a little bit of warmth and a little bit of ice building up, the roads are more dangerous. I see Amanda nodding at that. There's just not the infrastructure here to clear out, and the roads get more dangerous before they get better. So here I am at home.
Any reports of black ice?
No, you don't get reports of black ice here. You just get reports of accidents, or you witness them yourself.
Got it.
Texas drivers, that's what you get reports of.
Yeah.
There's always a
Don't
lot
get to
of
driving that stuff very often.
Well, joining us from another part of Texas where it was also, they didn't get snow per se, but it was 18 degrees down in San Angelo way. Our editor at large here, Amanda Razzani. Hey, Amanda, how are you? Cold.
Good.
I know cold.
I wish
but
there
we
was
are right.
snow. It'd be better if there was snow.
Yeah, sometimes if you're going to get cold, you might as well have cold. Could be worse though. You could be up in Denver with Mitch where he says it was -6. So,
Oh, no, thank you.
and
It was chill.
I felt terrible. I had to put on a long sleeve shirt today. It was like 63 degrees when I walked the dog this morning. It was raining though. But joining us from warmer climes, she's out in Silicon Valley. She's our marketing person extraordinaire, expert extraordinaire, host, radio host, all kinds of good things. Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hey there, good. I had to put on a puffer coat yesterday morning to get coffee. It was 39.
It was
in Silicon
39
Valley.
in the Valley.
39.
Wow, that's
yes.
cold. 39 in the Valley. I feel like we should, like, weather.com should be paying us a royalty or something here. We're doing the
Yeah.
job for him. Who's the guy from the weather station who always shows up? Jim Cantrell or someone, right? Whenever there's a hurricane or a bad
I need
storm.
Bonnie to be our meteorologist.
Well, Bonnie was here yesterday, but she's doing a report on the Paris climate change accords. But let's not go there. Anyway, that's our gang for today. We'll talk about climate change maybe in another episode, I'm sure. But for today, we're going to kick things off. I mentioned there's a war, literally a war going on around WordPress. Centers around Matt Mullenweg, who's one of the, I think he was one of the co-founders, certainly CEO of Automatic. And Automatic is the company behind WordPress. And if you don't know, WordPress runs something, Mitchell, is it like 45% plus of all the websites on the internet are actually WordPress.
It does. It's kind of the default. It's the default for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say what we use because it could be a security uh, um, incident, but yeah, it is a default for a lot of people. And I don't know what Mitch, why don't you give us the scoop and we could all chime in from there.
Well, the beef is Matt dropped this bomb of a blog post a while back, basically claiming WP Engine is freeloading off of the brand and getting too much benefit. And
Well,
not.
truth be told, I think he called him a cancer.
He did. Yes, I guess he did. Yeah, a cancer on society, cancer on WordPress.
Mhm.
That's
And-
Matt Mullenweg, the
Yes.
CEO of
Who's the
Automatic.
CEO of
Yeah.
Automatic.
And so it's battled back and forth. He told employees that didn't agree with him what he was doing, they could leave, and 177 people left the company. He put a checkbox on the login for WordPress that says you're not a developer that works for WP Engine, in essence. So it reminds me. Remember back in the Tenable and the Snort days?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Reminded me of, Mitch.
Yeah, you guys are all freeloading
Open
off
source
of our
remorse.
hard work.
Open source remorse.
Yeah.
Talk to Mitch at Hashimoto as well, and others. Open source remorse, I call it.
Exactly. So I think it's that repeat of that. You kind of get a little, heartburn. What did I do? Well, these people are making a lot of money off of my stuff, but it's open source, so they're allowed to.
Well, there's a little bit more of intrigue here, Mitch. In your usual Midwestern way, you're trying to be kind. But I think there's a darker side here.
Okay.
Look, so in addition to calling them a cancer, Matt locked them out of WordPress.org and WordPress.com. He locked them out. And then he started locking out anyone who spoke up against it or spoke out about it in true dictatorial fashion, right? Which is, it's not cool. That's not cool. I'm sorry. And on top of this, there were texts that were released evidently from Automic's counsel where Matt said it would be okay for WP Engine to do what they did as long as they gave WordPress.org 8% of their revenue. 8% of their revenue for using free open source. That goes way, way, way over the line. Now, just to show you that I'm a fair person, though, and I do look at both sides of the coin, full disclosure, we were a WP Engine customer for many years here at DevOps.com, Techstrong, all of our sites were hosted and still are, but not by WP Engine anymore. And we left WP Engine. Mitchell's CTO here at Techstrong. He can dive deeper into it. But we left WP Engine for many of the reasons that Matt cited. They don't give you the full WordPress experience. They're really not set up. I mean, at the time we were running, I don't know, a dozen or a dozen and a half different sites, and they weren't set up to support someone like Techstrong.
No, they didn't have the depth of knowledge on
No,
WordPress
they
to diagnose issues, and it's kind of for websites that are sitting around still running, but not heavy use sites like ours.
No.
Weren't
I'm
you
just
talking
curious-
yesterday? Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
Well, I'm just curious. I was reading that article about them being locked out. He just locked them out of WordPress. And I was thinking, couldn't this result in lawsuits if you get locked out of your own WordPress that you use, especially if it was for business?
They don't use, no, that's not what they locked him out of here, Amanda. So there's WordPress, the open source web content platform, WCP. You can take that, you put it on a server and you run it. But what happens is and that runs, it's self-contained. You're not on WordPress.org, you're not on WordPress.com. But what happens is a lot of the plugins for WordPress and a lot of the support and the updates to keep it current, the most secure version, you need to go back to the mothership to download, or it's hosted there. So
there's like a management site where all that comes from, and
Right.
that's what.
So now
the
all of
automatic-
a sudden
Okay.
it's headless, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's what he locked them out of.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
what
I was
he
thinking,
locked them
that's
out of.
crazy. What is he doing?
Yeah. Now, so I get it, right? And I've also Mitch, you alluded to, back in the day when Mitch and I were doing Still Secure, we had Tenable security. They took Nessus out of open source. They said after version 2, I think it was 2.7 or 2.4, after this version, it's no longer open source. There'll still be a free version. We'll tell you how you could use the free version, but it's not open source. We're not making the source code available. And as time goes on, you could still use the open source old version, but we're not updating it.
Mhm.
So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First, I'm reminded of our discussion yesterday, Alan, about the operation of the free market. And, WP Engine providing a service that didn't fit Techstrong, so Techstrong moved on. That's the operation of the free market. On the other hand, one organization controlling some essential operations of what is supposed to be open source or a freely available resource, that sounds like it's not the operation of
Oh,
the free market.
it's not. It's not. For sure it's not. Now, so there's two sites in question here. One is WordPress.org, which is the open source where you can download the source code, the packages, if you will, to install WordPress on your stuff. The other is WordPress.com, which is a fully commercial site. So I'm not sure if he locked them out of the .org or just the .com or both. But clearly, in the open source world, there's recourse here. You can fork. You can fork at any time, right? You can take the latest version of WordPress and fork it and go on without Matt and Automic and that whole thing. The issue is you're talking about something that hosts 43% of all the websites on the internet. And the infrastructure that's been built on WordPress.com as well as .org to support that, the researchers, you're going to need a critical mass of those folks, and you're going to need a big pile of cash, frankly. Atomic has a $7.5 billion market cap.
Well, so that leads
valuation.
to my second question, which is how sticky is this kind of a tool? Because on the one
Moving off of
hand,
WordPress for people is
Yeah.
is
It's a big
fly
deal.
paper.
You got to rebuild
sticky
your
guy.
site.
You ain't getting off of it.
You got to rebuild
Well,
your website. Not that it can't be
yeah,
done, but
yeah, I think that
Forking WordPress would be a different thing, but
that's
you're
different.
you're gonna need a critical mass of developers because WordPress is all about the plugins, right? And so
Right.
you need a critical mass of plugin developers. You need a critical mass of WordPress researchers, maintainers. Everything that goes into maintaining an open source, keeping it secure, bugs. I mean, there's a lot of compatibility issues with WordPress. It's a big undertaking. Now, to be fair, if you listen to Matt, calling these people parasites, that's what we used to call them in the open source security days, right? You're a parasite. You take, and you don't give. And that's basically what he was calling WP Engine. Matt says that they contribute, I forgot, 3,700 man hours a week to maintaining WordPress.org, the open source .org site that Automic contributes. You're
you're
crying
making me
for
cry. Go on.
the $7.5 billion company, right? Where WP Engine evidently minuscule amounts of contribution. I get it. I get the open source parasite issue, right? This is why I really like what I call the foundational model for open source, where you take something like WordPress and you set up a foundation, a not-for-profit foundation, like a Linux foundation or something, and you take out the competitive kind of go back and forth between different companies.
Kind of like putting it in a trust in
That's
a
right.
way.
It's putting it in a community trust where and the good
Well, there is a WordPress foundation, right? There is, but I think it manages the license. Not that's about it.
Yeah, it's a GPL license. It's a straight on GPL, I think V2 license. Atomic is a one-man band there. This goes back to the prior era of when I do how I, do open source history. I picture the first series of open source is what I call the Cathedral and the Bazaar, like the movie, like the book. You ever read that? And it's like Dr. Richard Stallman and, down with the man, free, free, free. Then we went into what I call the big brother era of open source, where you had companies like an Atomic or a Tenable or IBM who really owned these open source projects and ran them for their own benefit, their own profit, but under the facade of doing it for the community. And there was some good communities built like that. But then we had the foundational era of open source, right? And the not-profit foundation allows for co-opetition among competing vendors, that you're not doing it just for the sole benefit of one vendor who might be a competitor. And that's where we've seen open source blossom into the de facto standard that it is to today, not just WordPress, open source in general.
Now, Alan, by the way, Alan in his typical understated New York, Long Island way isn't giving himself enough credit here. He wrote for Network World, PC World, a whole bunch of magazines, blogged for them all about open source.
I've been covering open source. I was involved, the stuff Mitchell's talking about with Snort and Nessus, I was involved in that. I've been involved in open source a really long time.
Yeah.
This is typical sour grapes, right? Matt is upset that these people are parasiting and making
Is he
Atomic
upset
Sort
they're
7.5.
parasiting, or is he upset that he's not a billionaire yet? I mean,
Well-
I think he's dealing with something that literally he created.
Yeah.
And
But it's
folks
open
in his
source
position use a
remorse.
combination of messaging and statements and usually an actual strategic moves to try and gain some outcome that they're looking for. I'm just
Why
not
doesn't
seeing
he
the
just
strategic moves.
We saw
Host his own,
HashiCorp do
right?
this year, last year. We saw Red Hat do it. We've seen Atlassian, I believe, do it. I don't know if Atlassian did. Mitch may know, but what happens is look, you build your guy, you're a founder, you start the company, it's all kumbaya. Of course, we're going to want the community involved. Of course, we're going to open source it. It's all good. All, flower power. War's not healthy for children and other living creatures. And
My question is, why does he just go set up his own hosting company and take them out, compete in the market with them, and go for it. Don't quit whining about it.
well, because I think this is classic open source remorse. He now
is.
feels like they have single-handedly financed and built this Leviathan WordPress. And here's this company that now is approaching $1 billion in revenue or value, who doesn't give back. And it's
Well,
not right.
I thought this would be interesting. I shared that article on LinkedIn and got quite a few comments. And there's only a few times I see comments coming in on articles. So I saw this was on the show today. So I copied some of them. So a couple of the responses to that share was, it'll pan out. Open source has a way of using forks and taking off to different roads. His governance and tight grip will force the community into some new development. I wouldn't be concerned, as the core isn't being destroyed and the forks will bring even more opportunities. And then there was another comment kind of similar. It said, whether there's a migration to Classic Press or a new fork, Open Press, Free Press, LibrePress, etc., the community likely will shift wherever the top bulk contributors go, and WP Engine will likely shift as well.
And WP Engine may have the resources to make that happen. And that's what you'll see. You'll see a fork. People vote with their feet.
Go with their forks.
And that'll never be a billionaire. Poor
That's
Matt.
just a prediction. It's a kind of a funny scenario to be in, because WordPress, to my mind, was always sort of the, I don't know how to, it's like the biggest open secret, or so I don't know how to put it. Websites, utterly necessary. WordPress used by whatever it was, 43, 45% of of sites or organizations. And I'm not sure that this little corner of tech gets the kind of attention that almost every other part of tech does, and yet it is supremely fundamental. And that's why I asked the question about stickiness. I mean, what should we advise organizations that are listening to this, or folks who are listening to this? Does this mean you should invest some in diversifying your websites? I think the pain of that is great enough, and the outcome.
Yeah, I don't see that as an option.
So here we are.
I think the commenters on Amanda's LinkedIn post are right. The community is self-regulating. Figure it out.
It'll sort itself out.
It will. It's just going to be a little pain. But look, you get like a good old-fashioned security bug in a WordPress edition, and you see just how big WordPress is, right? How many sites are vulnerable to it. It's crazy. Anyway, hey, we're all way over time. We got to take a break. We're going to come back. Mitch, I know you're hopping. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on the next Techstrong Gang. But we're going to take a break here, and we'll be back with Don't Mess with Texas.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, we're back. As I mentioned, our next block is called Don't Mess with Texas. It seems like the Good Hands people, I love doing that. The Good Hands people have maybe gone a little too far. What's the commercial? Chaos? Is that the guy? What's his name? He's always has bandages and he's causing all kinds of mayhem, not chaos, mayhem. Looks like Mayhem may have gotten control of the IT team there. Amanda, what's the story?
I love that. Yeah, those commercials are funny. But yes, so the Attorney General is suing them, saying they're collecting all their data without their knowledge. And the article we posted goes on to share that they allege that Allstate is collecting the data through their phones without their knowledge to put together a big database of how everyone is driving. So my first thought was, I just assume everything is being collected on my phone. And at this point, I could almost care less. I mean, my phone's listening to me every day.
At least you think
That's
that,
true.
right? When you see the ads that come up.
Well, isn't it also that where if the data that they've been collecting, even if you're a passenger in a rideshare or a taxi, it's collecting that data. So you would get maybe dinged for speeding or running a stop sign or anything like that. So it's actually potentially causing even more harm to the people that are on this policy.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I have one of these apps on my phone from a different insurance company, USAA. And
You
as I mentioned a
served
couple,
with Gronk.
I
I'm kidding.
do not have that honor, no. But I get to inherit the honor from someone else in my family. So the app allows you to say that any given ride or whatever, you are not driving.
Right.
But
So this
nobody
all,
advertises that to you. And when I noticed it, I was like,
I
oh, I
don't
better
know if
go
all
check.
the apps give you that option, actually, guy.
Right.
Maybe
Exactly.
just USA.
So here yeah.
This all comes out of, a couple of years ago, it was Progressive who started it, but now they all do it. Originally, they weren't using your app because most of your phones have accelerometers in them so they could go by speed and so forth, but they weren't using your app. They used to send you a little plug-in that you would plug into the data socket of your car, and it would monitor your braking and your speed and so forth. And any other information that your car was able to give them. And as cars became more sophisticated with lane departures and stuff like that, it was even more. And the good news was, or the purported good news was that if you did good by, what the readings were, you could lower your car insurance by 20% or something like that. Sounds good. Yep. Until the first time you hit your brakes hard because someone stops in front of you or something else happens, or, it never worked for us. I never got $1 of savings from using those things. So I just stopped using them. Now, yep. Now they put it into your app directly. You don't even plug into the car. And of course, one of the first problems is, Guy, exactly what you said is, or Lisa, you actually said it too, is how does it distinguish if I'm a passenger or actually driving? So now they've given you the ability to opt out. But what a PIA that is. They get in the car and say, wait a second, I'm not driving. Or better yet, I don't want them tracking me. I'm going to say I'm not driving even if I am driving. And I'll put my car in the back seat. But I'll put my phone in the back seat. It's wrong. It's wrong. However, the legal beagle in me says, you don't think somewhere in that little checkbox you checked right in the beginning when you installed the app, you gave them permission to do all that? You don't think their lawyers were good enough to put that permission in the app? You may not have read that fine print, or you signed away your firstborn child too, but it's in there. And so if you clicked in it and said, okay, I'm not sure what Ken Paxton, who's a very, very busy guy, I know, doing all the right things. I don't know if this case is a winner. It's good
Hard to say.
publicity.
I think it's a political winner.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
publicity.
Amanda, I would love your perspective. You and I are both Texas residents. We've known Ken Paxton for a while. It's worth saying that, he's running a large office, doing a lot of very necessary work at the same time as he himself was under scrutiny in a case now
Let's
dismissed around
say he's
stock trading and things like
controversial at
that.
the least.
You can say, you could say that at the least. And I don't think it's judgment to say he is clearly highly politically motivated. And you might say
No
so is
doubt.
every elected attorney general, and that's fine. So this is a win-win politically. And it may do some good. It may do some good as well, because, I'm glad you brought up the contract, Alan, because we all sign these contracts. We get these giant contracts, terms and conditions that are gazillion miles long. And my uncle in Switzerland, who's now retired and one of the original gangsters of cybersecurity, honestly, back at Bolt, Beranek, and Newman in the late 60s, he reads these. I don't know anybody else who does.
No,
I know I don't.
So
I'm
No.
guilty as charged. I do not read those.
Same.
Who could?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing. Let's go after our favorite whipping boy, the insurance company. God forbid, are we going to hear Allstate CEO is shot dead in the street next?
another
Because-
political win-win. Keep going, Alan.
But I get it. Look, I'm no fan of insurance companies, right? Don't get me started. I live in Florida where we have some insurance issues. But I think we got to take the pedal off the metal of demonizing insurance companies.
I'm a big fan of insurance. We all should be. It's group, it's their community risk taking so that individuals don't get punished. But insurance companies,
but they are
in a
for-profit
deregulating
companies.
environment. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
If insurance companies were all co-ops that were not for profit and we just shared the risk, it was a risk sharing.
Yeah, those were the mutuals.
Like mutuals, yes.
Mutuals. That's what a mutual
I
is.
always think
And
of
they've
Marlon
gone to-
Perkins.
by the
Well, I
Just
get
wayside.
like-
why they.
Yep.
I get why they would be doing it. As I think about it, I just expect my phone is listening to me and tracking all my data, so I've come to that conclusion. I don't care much, but I get why it would be a concern, because if they use all this information in this database to say, oh, okay, now we're going to change our rates and all the rates are going to go higher because we're seeing that it's more likely, from all their information they gather, it's more likely they'll be driving fast in this area or this region, or, making these determinations and then changing their fees, that could be a concern. But I mean, it was probably in there and we just didn't read those contracts.
But what about if they don't change everyone's rates, Amanda? They just change your rates because you're a
That's what I'm saying.
hazard.
Like, oh, they drive faster in this region, or this person we know. Even go individually, not regionally. Yeah, if they start changing rates based on that,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's another term.
And there's no recourse.
that's a
Yeah, that's
concern
another
because nobody
term.
would know why
Community
or know
rating.
about it.
And let me give you
Yeah.
another little deep, dark secret about our friends in the insurance industry. I'm not calling for violence, don't get me wrong. But what they do is they form a not-for-profit consortium where they share data, right? When they look up and see how many accidents you had, how many tickets you've got, what's your driving record, they don't always get that from the DMV. They have, in order to get around antitrust, they set up not-for-profit consortiums, organizations that allow them to share data across carriers. And
Another thing in the T's and C's.
but that is in the T's and C's. And, I found this out both when I was practicing law as well as I actually used to sell security to a company down here in Florida, National NAI. I forget what it stood for, but this was all the workers' comp insurance companies in the US. They pool all their data so they know what kind of risk you are as an employer, how many claims as an employee you've had across different carriers. And it, antitrust, yeah, but it's a not-for-profit. They're exempt. And that's what the insurance, look, again,
that's
I
not
don't want to
bad on its own.
vilify.
That's not bad on its own because, one of to give an analogous example, law enforcement does not have a similar network so that people can, they have some networks, but it's not really as cohesive so that people can cross state boundaries or whatever. And,
Well, you know
not
what,
be,
Guy? Law enforcement is a government-empowered entity and is not doing it for a profit. Right?
Right. That's why the
That's the
rating issue
difference
about
here.
changing Amanda's rates. And so this term community rating has been thrown around a lot related to a lot of new prospective laws under consideration and things like that. Community rating is all about having people who are low risk help pay for people who are high risk. Nobody wants to describe it because everybody sits there and wants to say, well, if I'm a goody two shoes, why am I paying for the people who are not goody two shoes? But that's at the
But
core of
that's
how
behind
insurance
health
works.
insurance as well, right? That's the whole thing
Exactly.
behind Obamacare is you needed enough healthy people to offset the cost of paying for unhealthy people.
And no one talks about the benefit of that, which is a benefit to society and the community as a whole. It's not all of us all alone out there doing everything without any help from
I
anybody.
think it's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
And I'll say it and I'll say it again. Take the profit out of insurance companies. It'll never happen because their lobby is too strong and it's too big an industry. But if you took the profit out of insurance companies, A, our rates would go down drastically. And B, then you could have sort of that altruistic kind of thing, like Medicare, for instance, right? If we could do stuff like that, maybe we could do things like lower the deficit and get a lot more things done. A profit-driven, you look in Europe or where they have socialized medicine and stuff like this, they
Oh,
don't
yeah,
have.
because half my family are doctors. I've been saying for years that core sickness of healthcare in the United States is the for-profit motive.
Yeah.
And I just feel something a little morally I'm a total capitalist, all right? But I still feel something a little morally objectionable, not to individuals, doctors and stuff, making good money, helping the sick, but industries that rely on people getting sick in order to be profitable. There's something off about that.
Well,
and I
the
hadn't
whole
really thought about
wellness-
insurance in that way, but we make a compelling
You
case.
know, but this is the problem with insurance. If we knew that, hey, all of our rates would go down by doing this, behaving better, driving better, trying to live healthier. But that's not all that happens is more people make more money. But again, let me be clear. That doesn't give anyone the right to go shoot someone on the streets in New York. That's just wrong, right? That's not the
100%.
answer here. not the
What are the
answer.
what are the next steps though in Texas? I mean, is Allstate being really made to be a scapegoat here when probably all of the insurance companies have been doing the same thing for a very long time? What are kind of some of the expectations of Texans where this is concerned?
Yeah, you raised a good point. That was another thought I had when I was reading the article. It's probably aren't they all? I mean, it goes back to I assume everybody's collecting all my
Well, if
data.
you're going to pick on one,
Yeah.
pick on a big one, right?
Yeah.
And who's
A
bigger
big one
than
based out of
Allstate?
state. Allstate's not based in Texas, unlike USAA, which is.
Right, USA
And
San
you know.
Antonio. But I mean, Allstate's. I mean, it's one of the big. It's probably Allstate, Geico, State Farm, and Progressive are probably the four biggest. Anyway, I'm sure, Mandy, you're right. They're probably all doing it, but someone had to be the whipping boy here.
Well, it'll be curious to see what from a marketing perspective Allstate says in response to that. In
Allstate's going to
response
say, "Hey,
to
it's in the fine print. You got to read it."
and they could absolutely do that, Ellen, to your point, and be clear.
Yep.
Be
And
fine.
maybe here's going to be the upshoot, because you know how these things go. After Ken Paxton gets his pound of flesh of publicity, the settlement's going to be that Allstate's going to put that in bold 9-point font in the disclosures that no one will read anyway, and we'll all go home happy. They'll make their money. Ken gets his scalp, and we move on to the next publicity stunt. Such is life in America. Anyway, let's take a break on Techstrong Gang. We're going to come back and we'll talk about, do we have a cybersecurity apathy problem? I don't know if I care. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey everyone, we're back here on Techstrong Gang. Our next block, our C block, is does cybersecurity have an apathy problem? It's an article out of Security Boulevard. Lisa, what do you think?
You know, it's so interesting, the data that was cited that shows a Barcara study of over 1,000 adults who they're seeing a decline in concern of compared to the previous year, and consumers are starting to become apathetic towards cybersecurity breaches because they're so common. The challenge is, and the data show in the study, that there's issues with employees being reckless, there's issues with consumers being reckless, and the employee side, we know that so many companies in every industry require security training, so there's consistent training and awareness, but it's still the problem lies with people, whether they're employees or they're consumers. The breaches are so common. I think that's part of why we're seeing the concern go down, because they're happening all the time. Probably a lot of people who've had, that your password was appeared in a data leak. Thought, well, I'm still able to access my Amazon or whatever I want to do, regardless, and don't care as much. But something that I thought was interesting was that on the employee side and the consumer side, the consumers don't want to know that it's employees working at their favorite, outlet, e-commerce outlet, for example, that are probably the cause and falling for this very sophisticated social engineering tactic that has happened. But a lot of employees are reusing passwords across work and online shopping accounts. The data also showed this number was high. 57% said they were comfortable using work devices for personal shopping, and that hugely increases the cyber risk. So the apathy that we're seeing is a concern in and of itself. Because there were some huge breaches last year. AT&T was breached, Hot Topic was breached. We saw credit unions breached, and folks are just saying, another thing that was interesting about the data is that there's a generational divide. So from a demographics perspective, the Gen Zers want to hear from a company that's had a breach. They want to understand the technical implications and what they should do on their mobile security, for example, whereas baby boomers are more likely to churn and find another provider that can deliver the same results. So companies from a marketing perspective have to reach out to employees and consumers and have different messages and different ways of mitigating challenges or breaches, if you will, based on who their target audiences are. So a lot of challenge there for organizations to get those right messages out to the right people in the way that they want to consume them. So hopefully that apathy starts to go down.
Lisa, did the study cover mostly sort of end user side? Like, is the evidence here about apathy among end users, or what about organizations themselves and their cybersecurity efforts or teams or what have you?
From what I understand, to your point, it was end user focused, end users that are how they behave when they're employees, and end users how they behave when they're consumers. I don't think we saw anything from a from an organizational perspective. We know though that, like I said earlier, how many different security trainings have we all been through with all the various companies that we've all worked with? It's required, check the boxes, you pass the test, etc. But the behavioral issue is, I think, at the crux of this. We're seeing people that just want to do things as they are. They don't want any interruptions on whether they're employees or they're consumers with how they're doing transactions. So that behavioral change is a really big challenge to augment. And so we're seeing folks that just don't care as much because, hey, this is happening every day. I've been part of a breach before. I was fine. I don't care.
Yeah, and the predict session that I did with Amanda and with Hope Lynch, this was an element that we talked about because the prediction was 2025 will be the year of the fragile app, and one element of this is cyber resilience and cybersecurity, and we didn't have the evidence. But we did discuss this general feeling that amidst all the storm of all the different things that developers of apps are trying to do, cybersecurity seems to be falling a little bit by the wayside. There's a certain amount of laziness or apathy that seems to be setting in. So that would be on the app builder and organizational side as opposed to the user side.
Well,
Yeah. And this was focused on the users.
So look, I've got about 25 years in cyber. It's not a new issue, man. We call it in cyber, we call it desensitization. You get desensitized. It's the boy who cried wolf. First time it happens, you say, "Oh my God, my valuables, my social security number, my everything is vulnerable. What should I do? Oh, they're going to give me free credit monitoring. Hallelujah." Right? And then, the third time it happens, it's a little less climatic. The 10th time it happens, you don't give a crap. The 20th time it happens, you're annoyed. Right? But I've gotten 3-4 breach letters in the same day from 3 or 4 different either credit cards or stores or organizations that had PII of mine. It is an ongoing sin of what goes on in our world. However, it's something that we are very desensitized about, and there's a high level of apathy. So much so that with all of these breaches, and I've said it on here, I'll say it again, within 6 months after the breach, whatever economic impact there was to that company is gone. Their stock price is back where it was or higher. It's forgotten. Even the boomers who churned back because the one they churned to was the next victim of the breach. At the end of the day, we are a herd of zebras. And we just hope that today's not the day the lion eats us, right? We could get breached, but they didn't steal nothing from me. Now, there are people in cybersecurity say, I'll tell you how you get people to get rid of that apathy. Don't make the credit cards responsible, right? Because right now, look, you get breached. They breach your credit card. They bang it out for a couple grand. You make a claim. You're in that within 20 minutes, your credit is they give you the credit back, and it's, and they have subsumed the loss. They investigate it. Every once in a while, they'll catch someone. But it's really of no consequence to you. They give you free credit monitoring. You like getting those little annoying Equifax or TransUnion or the other one. I forget the other one, and I subscribe to it. Experian. You get your thing. Someone's and you get used to it. It's a total desensitization. It is the price we pay for living in a digital world. And that price has largely been borne by the banks, credit card companies, etc. Most people have never really felt the economic harm. Now, people who were victims of identity fraud, though, and I don't know how many of them you've ever spoken to in your life, but that's a friggin' nightmare. Someone, starts filing IRS returns in your name, or like ruins your credit because you weren't paying attention. That's a nightmare I wish on no one. Yeah, and the thing about this past year, for the first time, I started getting notices that, hey, your social security number was in the data that was taken. It wasn't just your name, your address, or your email, your social security number. We have got to get off social security numbers as a unique identifier, because you can't go get a new social security number. You're stuck with it. So all you can do is just then go monitor and lock your credit files, which is a half-assed kind of response. Social security numbers were never meant to be your unique identifier for credit or for anything else, other than making a social security, keep your social security account. We need to get off passwords. Hell yeah. We need to get away from social security numbers as a unique identifier. Absolutely. Breach disclosure laws are pretty much de rigueur. They're started with California, and most of the states have them now, and federal, that a company must report a breach within a certain time frame. And there have been times, look, it cost the Equifax CEO his job at some point, right? A couple of years back. But it's just, that's the world we live in.
You bring up a great point about the desensitization that folks are just, this study talked about, they use the word reckless consumer behavior, reckless employee behavior. It's the person, but the behaviors are so hard to change because they're so ingrained in who we are. We either don't care about this, hence the increase in apathy, or the decrease in concern that this study reported, or we just assume it's somebody else's problem. I don't need to deal with it. There's too much information out there. I can't be responsible for this. But they want to hear from companies when there is a breach. We talked about the cheeseheads, Alan, a few weeks ago. The
Yes.
Green
The
Bay
Green Bay
Packers
Packers fan
merch store, the pro shop was And what
hacked in.
surprised me about that was, I think it was about 8,500 people that were
No,
affected.
that was
but
tiny.
It was small, but it seemed like they actually disclosed that far sooner than we're seeing other breaches disclosed. So organizations need to get better at that.
It depends on
here.
the state and stuff. Some within days, some within weeks, some within months. But here's
Yes.
another thing. The whole system of passwords that we use, right? The average person has 152 passwords. And they tell us, don't repeat the same password. You only use one password per site. Who are we kidding? Who the hell remembers 152 passwords? So then you need a password manager. But don't lose your master password. And if your master password gets breached, or the password manager got breached, as has happened with LastPass numerous times and some of the others, then they have your whole vault anyway. So the whole system of using passwords versus biometrics or other kinds of technology is again, we're just setting ourselves up for failure and desensitization and this stuff. It's Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day.
I think
That's exactly what it is.
live biometrics is the answer. Real-time biometrics. That's how you get into anything.
I think some of the more like Google and Facebook, some of the other ones I've been using lately, that they send it to your other device.
Yeah.
That you got to actually do something. Not just two-factor, but I mean like real biometric kind of stuff. Maybe, but as long as we rely on passwords and the average person has 150 passwords, this is, again, the rule, the game, the life we've chosen.
The problem will persist. We won't
Yeah.
see that change.
Terrible,
and
but
continue to see the
as a
apathy.
security, and You spoke about the security people versus, the consumer. As a security person, it's disheartening because you
Sure.
can never win. You can never win. You're always losing.
Oh, honestly, so I was not in security. I haven't covered security. It's not really my area. But when I was at a cloud provider, I worked a lot with, because it was one of those kinds of specialty cloud providers. I worked a lot with really top-notch security professionals, and that's going like back 10 years, 8 years ago. And let me tell you, they were already jaded, right? And I think it's sort of endemic.
It's why they
And
drink. I'm only
yeah,
kidding. But if you've
no,
ever read the Phoenix
oh,
Project, right? The CISO, he's an alcoholic, right? Because how'd you like to be, you never know when you win because by definition, winning is nothing happened.
Right.
But
yeah,
you
exactly.
damn
It's a
well know
perfect
That's
when
not
storm.
you
going to be talked
lose.
about.
It's a
You damn
perfect
well,
storm. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a perfect storm.
It's hard being a security person.
And let's take a moment to acknowledge the security professionals watching this, whom we're trying to provide insights to, because we recognize your continuing contribution with almost no credit or recognition, honestly.
And they are my people. We'll be at RSA this year doing DevSecOps again. Come see me. All right. I think that's going to wrap up a fantastic Techstrong Gang. Guys, gals, thank you so much. This was a
Thank you.
great
It's
discussion.
great to be here. Yeah.
Yep, guys, stay off those roads and stay safe. Amanda, put the heated blanket on. Lisa, keep doing what you're doing. It's all good. We'll be back. Well, we have a full Techstrong TV day for you today, so check that out. We got some interesting stuff on there. We'll be back tomorrow with another gang. I can't wait to jump on it. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Have a great day, everyone.